Have you ever worked incredibly hard to solve a problem only to realize you were solving the wrong one? Well, I think we have all been there. We have thrown more time at it. We have worked harder to solve that problem. We even looked towards a better strategy to solve the problem. And yet somehow nothing really changed. And it's not because we are solving the problem poorly, it's actually because we are solving the wrong problem. Now, I've come to realize that one of the greatest challenges in business and also in life is not a lack of effort. It's actually a lack of discernment. Is taking the time to pause and ask, is this really the problem that I need to solve? Because if we didn't ask that question, we could spend months, even years, fixing symptoms rather than addressing the real issue and leaving it untouched. Because our minds naturally gravitate to what's the most obvious. So if our sales are down, we just assume it's a sales problem. If business is slow, we assume we need more marketing. And if we're overwhelmed, we just assume we need better time management. Now, all of those can actually be true, but they may not be the real problem. Sometimes what we are seeing is simply the symptom. So imagine going to a doctor for, let's say, a persistent cough. Well, the cough will get your attention, but treating it doesn't necessarily address what is actually causing the cough, because the cough isn't always the problem. It could be the symptom pointing to something deeper. I think the same thing happens in our businesses and in our lives. The visible problem isn't always the root problem. Now, over the years, I have noticed we spend far more time asking, how do I fix this? Rather than asking, why is this even happening? Because those are two very different questions. So, for example, let's say someone says, I need more clients. Well, that could be true, but maybe the real problem is your message isn't clear. Or someone says, I need to make more sales. Again, could be true, but maybe your offer is not communicating enough value. Or someone says, I need more time, but maybe the real issue isn't even time. It could be your priorities or boundaries or saying yes to too many things that don't align with what matters most. Because sometimes we become so focused on solving the obvious problem, we never stop to ask whether it is the right problem. And until we identify the right problem, every solution feels frustrating. I've experienced this in my businesses as well because there's been seasons where I felt I needed more visibility. I wanted more people to hear my message. So that is where I focused most of my energy. But when I actually stepped back and evaluated where I was in this season, I realized that visibility wasn't my biggest problem in the season anymore because the opportunities were coming in. What I really needed was stronger systems. I needed better follow up. I needed clearer processes. I needed to prepare my business for the growth that was occurring. Now, the visibility problem didn't disappear, it just evolved. If I had continued to focus on visibility alone, I would have missed what my business actually needed next. And that experience reminded me that growth often requires us to solve a different problem than the one that got us to where we are. So, whenever I feel stuck, I try to slow down before jumping to the next action and ask, what do I need to do? I don't ask that. First, I ask, is what am I trying to solve? What problem am I trying to solve? Then I ask, is this the real issue? Or is it just the most visible one? What assumptions am I making? And what evidence am I overlooking? Now, if someone from the outside was looking at my situation, what would they notice that might be missing? What if this isn't the problem at all? Because those questions, they create space, so you go from reacting to responding with intention. Because clarity doesn't come from doing more, but from seeing more clearly. So if there's one thing I hope you take from today's conversation is this: don't be so quick to solve the first problem you see. Pause, reflect, and get curious. Because sometimes the challenge in front of you isn't the real problem. The symptom is simply pointing you to something deeper. Now, the entrepreneurs I work with are incredibly capable. They're intelligent, hardworking, and extremely resourceful, and rarely is the issue a lack of effort. More often, they have been investing an incredible amount of energy on the wrong problem. Now, once they identify the real issue, well, that is when everything begins to change for them. So, this week, I want to leave you with this one question: what if the one thing you've been trying so hard to fix isn't actually the real problem? Sometimes the breakthrough isn't finding a better solution. Sometimes it's asking a better question.